Wall Street closed lower Thursday as hopes for fresh fiscal stimulus ahead of President-elect Joe Biden's pandemic aid proposal were pitted against a weakening labor market. The number of Americans filing first-time applications for unemployment benefits surged last week, confirming a weakening in labor market conditions as a worsening COVID-19 pandemic disrupts operations at restaurants and other businesses. Delta Air Lines CEO Ed Bastian expects 2021 to be the year of recovery after the COVID-19 pandemic cut operating revenue by 64% and prompted its first annual loss in 11 years. These and more on TFT News. I'm Mike Wallace, and this is TFT News. A UK study has found that COVID-19 infections probably do give immunity for at least 5 months, but those antibodies don't prevent the immune from carrying and spreading the virus to others.
Getting COVID-19 likely gives you immunity for at least 5 months, a UK study said on Thursday. But you might still be able to carry and spread the virus to others. Scientists at Public Health England studied tens of thousands of healthcare workers who'd been tested regularly since June. Out of more than 6,500 people who tested positive, they found that 42 were possibly reinfected and 2 probably reinfected. That represents an 83% protection against reinfection. But a past positive test doesn't mean you can relax on social distancing and other COVID rules. Those antibodies might give you so-called natural immunity for months, but you may still be able to carry the new coronavirus in your nose and throat and unwittingly pass it on. Experts also warned that the findings mean that those who contracted the disease during the first wave of the pandemic, back in early 2020, could now be vulnerable to catching it again. They plan to keep monitoring to see if some people develop immunity for longer than 5 months. The study did not examine immune responses to the vaccines currently being rolled out, or their efficacy.
Wall Street closed lower Thursday as hopes for fresh fiscal stimulus ahead of President-elect Joe Biden's pandemic aid proposal were pitted against a weakening labor market.
Wall Street ended lower Thursday after a disappointing jobs report. The Labor Department reported that the number of Americans filing new jobless claims rose to 965,000 last week. That was much more than economists had expected. The S&P 500 fell 0.4%, the Dow shed 0.5%, and the Nasdaq lost 0.1%. Investors now turn their attention to President-elect Joe Biden, who is scheduled to deliver a massive pandemic relief proposal in a highly anticipated speech later Thursday. National Securities Chief Market Strategist Art Hogan said Wall Street has high expectations.
The $1.5 trillion. We may see something north of that, but I think that's consensus, and anything south of consensus would be disappointing. And I think this is a market that's planning on at least $1.5 trillion of additional fiscal policy stimulus.
Airline stocks gained ground. Delta Airlines CEO Ed Bastian said 2021 would be the year of recovery after the pandemic drove his company to post its first annual loss in 11 years. Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing sparked a rally in chip stocks. The chip maker's U.S. shares shot up nearly 6% after the company posted its best ever quarterly profit and lifted its estimates for revenue and capital spending. U.S. listed shares of China's Alibaba and Baidu also rose. Sources said the Trump administration scrapped its plans to blacklist the Chinese tech giants and shelved its plans to ban investment in the companies. Earnings season kicks off Friday with reports from some major U.S. banks, J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo.
U.S. security forces are mounting a national operation to thwart any violence before President-elect Joe Biden takes office, while Democrats warned of possible political violence even after the January 20th swearing-in.
Washington in lockdown Thursday ahead of a presidential inauguration that is shaping up to be like none other in modern history. At least 20,000 National Guard troops descending on D.C. Construction of high fencing with barbed wire to secure the U.S. Capitol. And a message from local authorities to those planning actions similar to last week's deadly siege. Stay away. Virginia Governor Ralph Northam.
I need everyone to listen very closely. If you're planning to come here or up to Washington with ill intent in your heart, you need to turn around right now and go home. You are not welcome here, and you're not welcome in our nation's capital. And if you come here and act out, Virginia will be ready.
Hotels, airlines, and other businesses are also ramping up security ahead of President-elect Joe Biden's swearing in on January 20th, with officials fearing violence in the days leading up to and following the ceremony. Delta is prohibiting travelers to Washington area airports from checking firearms, and Airbnb canceled reservations in the D.C. area after speaking with local law enforcement, CEO Brian Chesky told Reuters Thursday.
We felt like, well, if the mayor and governors of the surrounding states were discouraging people from coming, then why are we providing housing?
Certain metro stations will be closed and buses rerouted through January 21st. And it's not just Washington that's on high alert. Officials have warned of armed protests in all 50 states, especially in swing states President Trump lost in the election, like Pennsylvania, where the state capitol building in Harrisburg has been boarded up. In Ohio, Governor Mike DeWine said on Thursday the State House and state office buildings in downtown Columbus would be closed from Sunday through Wednesday.
The number of Americans filing first-time applications for unemployment benefits surged last week, confirming a weakening in labor market conditions as a worsening COVID-19 pandemic disrupts operations at restaurants and other businesses.
The jobs market is weakening as the pandemic worsens. The Labor Department reported Thursday the number of Americans filing new jobless claims surged to 965,000 last week. That was a lot more than economists had forecast. The surge in coronavirus cases has disrupted operations at restaurants and bars. The Federal Reserve reported Wednesday that stricter containment measures led to renewed job cuts in the leisure and hospitality sector. That sector accounted for the biggest chunk of job losses in the government's employment report for December. Another likely factor driving claims higher, many Americans reapplied for benefits after the government renewed a $300 unemployment supplement as part of its $900 billion relief package. Jobless claims have remained stubbornly high. Although they've dropped from the record of nearly 6.9 million in March, they remain well above their peak of 665,000 hit during the Great Recession. And economists say it could take several years for the labor market to recover from the fallout of the pandemic.
The much-anticipated and delayed World Health Organization team investigating the origins of the coronavirus has finally arrived in Wuhan, but is warning they may not find clear answers in the weeks to come.
The much-anticipated and delayed World Health Organization team investigating the origins of the coronavirus has finally arrived in Wuhan, only to hit another setback. 2 members have been forced to remain behind after they tested positive for coronavirus antibodies. The rest are quarantining for 14 days. It's been a year now since the first reports of the disease emerged in Wuhan. The international team of scientists was supposed to arrive a month ago, but was delayed by the Chinese government, which drew a rare public criticism of Beijing from the WHO at the time. Beijing says the delay was a misunderstanding. The United States has also criticized the terms of the visit, under which Chinese experts have done the first phase of research. Washington has long accused Beijing of lack of transparency and hiding the extent of the initial outbreak. Meanwhile, Beijing is pushing a narrative that the virus may have existed outside China before it was discovered in Wuhan, partly due to scientific papers that suggest it may have circulated in Europe in 2019. One WHO team member, however, has warned that while they don't expect any hindrances as they scour the city, the scientists may not find clear answers here.
Delta Airlines CEO Ed Bastian expects 2021 to be the year of recovery after the COVID-19 pandemic cut operating revenue by 64% and prompted its first annual loss in 11 years.
Delta Airlines posted its first annual loss in 11 years Thursday, but the carrier sees business picking up in the second half of this year. CEO Ed Bastian told Reuters it expects 2021 will be the year of recovery that'll hinge on factors such as the pace of vaccine rollouts and people's appetite for flying. He said the carrier expects summer travel will show meaningful improvement, good enough to drive profitability in the second half of the year. That's when he also expects business travel to pick up, but a recovery in international travel could take at least another year. Delta's outlook sent its shares up more than 4% in early trading Thursday. But the near term could be rocky after the carrier posted a loss of more than $12 billion last year. The airline sees its actual flight capacity falling by more than half as it continues to block middle seats until the end of March. Delta, which lost an average of $12 million a day in the last 3 months, expects revenue to fall by up to 65% in the first quarter.
And those are the latest from around the world. I'm Mike Wallace, and this is TFT News.